I thought I would give my experience on voting. Now, if you were raised in a cult like I was, it's a pretty big challenge because I was told that God's kingdom would come, and part of the teachings was that we were not allowed to be part of any governmental organization, which included voting or participating in the military or the police or anything like that. And so I was not allowed to vote. The first time I voted, it was in the year 2000, and I had accidentally registered to vote here in the state that I live in. Was just a little check mark that said vote. And so I checked it, not even really thinking about it, that I had sinned against God, but I had registered myself to vote. So in the year 2000 was the first time I actually went to go vote in my life. And I was in my late 20s when that happened, and I was terrified. I drove to the polling station, I sat in my car, and I think I broke out into a cold sweat. I took everything I had just to drive to the polling station. Once I got into the polling station, I was a nervous wreck. I assumed that God was going to come and kill me at that moment in time. I was breaking so many laws in the cult that I was raised in just by being there. And I went through the motions. They kind of shuffle you around from station to station to station, and I just followed even though I was sweating and terrified. And I got into the little voting booth, and I voted for the first time for president. 2000 was a funny year for it to be the first time. It was a direct 50-50 split across the nation. Like we think of what we're about to go into this year in November, and in 2000, it was literally 50-50. And the president in that year in 2000 was decided by court in Florida because it was so close. But I voted, I went out, and I think I went to my car and I started crying because I was so overwhelmed with emotion, and I didn't know what was going to happen to me. I had already broken a ton of the laws of the cult that I was raised in, but voting was a big one. That was a big one that I had to overcome, and I did it, and now I vote as much as I can. So your first step is to register to vote. I'm going to put a link down. Probably the easiest way is Rock the Vote from MTV. Back in the day, that was a big one. Use that to direct you to where you want to go. So you want to register to vote. If you can register to vote in your state, when you get your driver's license, that's probably the easiest. That's what happened to me. You want to check and see if you are registered to vote, and we'll put that link in the description also. So there's a couple of steps you need to take first. So register, see if you're registered, then register, and make sure you get that done by the deadline if you want to vote in this upcoming election. And so I thought, based on that experience that I had, if you were raised in a cult where you were not allowed to vote, or if you were raised in a cult where you're told who to vote for, and now you're faced with all this freedom, there's a lot to consume. Who do you vote for? How do you choose? How do you make that decision? And I'll tell you how I kind of came up with that decision and how I got to who I was going to vote for the first time in the year 2000. Now, when it comes to president, or in your country, the high supreme leader, whatever you call it, but here in the States, the president, who you're going to vote for, that's probably the easiest decision you're going to make. And a lot of times that decision is based on your own emotion, how you emotionally respond to what one leader is saying over another leader. And you get a lot of airtime so you understand kind of what this person believes over what this person believes. And so that probably is the easiest decision that you're going to make. But in case it's not, a good rule of thumb is to examine yourself and to take that emotion out of it and to look at what are the policies, what are the things that are important to you. Is X important to you? And if that's important to you, then vote this way. If this is important to you, vote this way. So really look at policy over emotions, because a lot of times politicians will use emotions. And if you were in a cult, you understand how emotions run against you. And so don't use emotion, but but use logic when making your decisions, specifically for president if you don't know who you're going to vote for. Now, if you were raised that you were told this is how we vote and this is how we feel, but maybe that doesn't align with the beliefs that you've come to believe after you've left the organization, then it's important to step back and really examine and take the time to reflect on what is it that you really believe. Not what you were told to believe, not what your family group or your cult says, this is how we think, but really how do you feel? How do you think about politics? How do you feel about certain policies, things like that? Once you establish that, then you can take that and make your decisions logically and not based on rhetoric or emotions that the politician is pushing out. Now for president, again, like I said, it's probably very easy for you to decide who you're going to vote for president. Where it gets a little bit more challenging is down the ballot. Another resource that you can use is a sample ballot. We'll put a link to that also. You can look up your state and see what is going to be on the ballot. One of the problems that I had was one of the first times I voted was voting for the Commissioner of Agriculture. It's like, what is that? I don't even know what that is. And I would ask people, one of the things that I did was I would ask people, what is this? And how are you voting? Because I was curious. I wanted to know what the Commissioner of Agriculture was, and no one really gave me an answer. And I was kind of stumbling around. This is 2000, so there wasn't a whole lot of information online. There was a little bit, but not much. And I think I left that one blank, which is a shame because now you have so much available for you to be able to research. When I looked at ChatGPT and I said, what is the Commissioner of Agriculture? And I realized this position is so important for our day-to-day life because this is the person that determines the pricing on food, that determines the food safety, and that's an important role within our government. So who is running for that role? A or B? What do they believe? What are their policies? What is their track record? You can find all that information now, and you can use AI to help you identify who is running and what they believe, and then align how you feel based on that. A lot of people will tell you also, vote blue all the way down the ballot or vote red all the way down the ballot. And if you're not in the United States, that's how we determine political party is by color, blue or red. And I would highly caution against doing that. I would caution against being all in for one thing and really think about what is important to you. Now that you've left that organization that was so controlling, look inward. What is important for you? What do you believe? And then vote that way. So maybe a red Republican aligns more with how you feel for the Commissioner of Agriculture and will do a better job, then vote that way. But you determine how you're going to do. Don't let a political movement say vote blue all the way down the ballot, because that's may not align with how you feel personally, or vote red all the way down the ballot. Another thing to think about too is as you get even deeper down the ballot is looking at maybe the school board or a local councilman. Those roles may not seem important to you, especially in my case, because I had no idea who any of that was. I had no civics instruction whatsoever, so it was a deep dive into civics to learn how to vote in the first place. But do the research and use AI, use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever AI tool you're using to help you determine what are the policies. And you can say, okay, this councilman is running for this seat in my area based on the research you did from the sample ballot. How have they voted in the past? What have they done? And then does that align with how I want to vote? And if it's a local council person that you're looking for, you can actually go and meet them and see and ask them questions. Go to town halls and participate in that. God is not going to kill you if you go to a councilman's town hall. You've erased that brainwashing. And so you can go and show up, get some free food, and ask your questions to that councilman. Now, these councilmen or the school board, you may not have children, but they have a direct impact on your life. They're the ones that make the decisions for your local community, and it's really important for you to investigate who these people are and will they do the best for you as a constituent in their area. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And it can feel overwhelming, especially you're dealing with all this other stuff that you probably have to deal with, the brainwashing and all this stuff that comes to the surface that you're working through. But this is a time right now that we're going into this election cycle. So invest the time, take a couple hours and do your research. It's worth it. It's also worth it to investigate in yourself to figure out, what do I believe? How do I think? Because that'll help you in the long run. And it will get easier over time. If this is your first election that you're voting after leaving a cult, it's really hard. It's hard and it's scary, but you can do it.